Good evening, beautiful people. I hope you guys are having a good time. So my goal tonight is to take you guys with me on a journey into the world of the average woman living with obstetric fistula. This is a world that most people will never experience, and it's difficult to imagine if you don't even know about it. It's a world that should exist in history, in textbooks, but unfortunately, it's a world that we still see today. When I think of the typical obstetric fistula patient, I think of a woman like Habiba. And actually, I'm going to call her a girl. Habiba is young, she's very poor, very definitely illiterate. As is usual in her community, at about age 14, she's married off, gets pregnant almost immediately, and then proceeds to be in labor for 3 long, hard days. When she delivers, her baby is dead. While still mourning this devastating loss, she now realizes she's leaking both stool and urine from her vagina. She's confused. She feels ashamed that she did something wrong. Her husband abandons her. And so over the next 3 years, with only her mother by her side, Habiba undergoes several surgeries before she's once again continent of urine and feces. As we say in the fistula world, she's now dry. An obstetric fistula is an abnormal connection between a woman's birth canal, that's her vagina, and either her bladder or her birth canal and her rectum, or sometimes both. It's a direct result of untreated, prolonged, obstructed labor. So what that means is that when the woman goes into labor, her body is too small for a normal-sized baby to fit. Remember, Habiba is 14. So this is a child trying to have a normal-sized baby. So the baby gets stuck. As she contracts painfully in labor, the head of the baby, the hard skull of the baby, is repeatedly pushed against the bones of the pelvis. Any tissue between those two hard structures is going to be crushed. So her bladder gets crushed, no more blood supply. Or her rectum gets crushed between the back of her pelvis and the baby's head, and there's no more blood supply. Once the baby is born, this tissue's down and slough off, and then there's a gaping hole in her vagina, and she leaks from that. Sadly and unsurprisingly, most of these deliveries end with the baby dead anyway. Over 90% of these babies do not survive the delivery. The few who survive will die within the first few weeks of life. And those who do not die will suffer severe neurologic consequences. When this happens to her, she begins to leak urine. So just imagine being wet all the time. Being constantly wet. You sit down, you're wet. You sleep in a pool of your own urine. And when you stand up, like in this picture, a puddle of urine collects at your feet. You can't change your rags fast enough to be dry. Either way, you smell. You smell of feces, or you smell of urine, or you smell of both like her. Your husband abandons you, your family is ashamed of you, they hide you away, and, it's just a horrible situation. And for most of these women, that is all they have left. After long, harrowing days in labor, they have no baby, they have no dignity, just a shattered body and a shattered life. Back in the biblical days, lepers were considered outcasts. Like, they were cursed by God for their sins. And to be touched by one of them was considered unlucky, so they were ostracized from their community. Women like Habiba today, they're treated no better than the lepers of biblical time. But those are the survivors. By some, they're considered the lucky ones. Because for every woman who develops a fistula in Nigeria, 5 women will die in childbirth. Nigeria has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world today. And apart from the physical trauma that these women suffer, there are psychological and social issues. So this is Miriam. When I met Miriam in 2010, she was 21. But her first and only pregnancy had ended in an emergency cesarean section for an already dead baby when she was 15. And she'd also developed a fistula. She was one of the lucky ones. Her fistula was treated, and when I met her, she was dry. But she had never had a menstrual period since then, and she had been unable to get pregnant. So that was her problem. I had just done an ultrasound on her to figure out why she no longer was having any menses. Unknown to this poor girl, at the time of that cesarean section for a dead baby, they had also had to remove her uterus. That procedure probably saved her life. But, I mean, in most African cultures, a woman's standing in society is so closely bound with her, you know, she has like an obligation to satisfy her husband's sexual needs, to bear his children, and her sense of self-worth and her standing in society is so closely bound up in that. So for her, not being able to fulfill this expectation was really devastating, even though she'd been cured of her fistula. Now her place was questionable. So there's a problem with reintegration of these women who have been stigmatized by obstetric fistula back into society, because they've already been considered marked. And now here she is, she can't have children because unfortunately most of them will suffer such devastating damage to their bodies and their pelvises that they will never again have another pregnancy or bear another child. And so this is a 21-year-old who is poor, she's uneducated, she's most definitely depressed, and she's condemned to an uncertain future because her usefulness to her husband's household is now in question. Most obstetric fistulas are caused by delivery. But there's another ugly secret in Nigeria, and that's the one of female genital mutilation. This lovely 14-year-old girl in a 9-year-old's body was married off to an older man. Because her body was too small, her pelvis was too narrow, she underwent a rather barbaric ritual. It's called gishiri cutting. It's a ritual in which a long knife is put into a girl's vagina and it's cut so that it can accept a grown man's penis. In Hawa's case, this knife went into her bladder and she started to leak urine immediately. When that happened, guess what? The marriage was off. She's damaged goods. So she's returned to her family. Done. Gishiri cutting is the commonest form of female mutilation in northern Nigeria. And it's done for various ridiculous reasons. It could be, like I said, to marry a little child off. It could be because a woman has pain during sex. It could be because she's infertile and she hasn't had kids. It could be because she's a young girl who doesn't want to be married to an old man and she keeps running home to her parents, and so to cure her from running away from her old husband, they do the gishiri cutting on her. So that's northern Nigeria. In southern Nigeria, female genital mutilation takes the form of female circumcision. And according to statistics, 1 in 4 women in southern Nigeria by the age of 15 has undergone some form of female genital mutilation via circumcision. In that case, it's done because people think that a woman's genitals are unclean. If you circumcise the woman, she's not going to be promiscuous, so she's not going to bring shame on herself and on her family. I mean, ridiculous reasons. When these women go into labor, because of scar tissue, they stand a very high chance of prolonged obstructed labor because it slows down the delivery of the baby. So that's kind of like your typical obstetric fistula patient, right? Young, poor, impoverished, usually rural. This is Nkuru, not your typical patient. This is an educated woman from Imo State. She was in labor for 5 days in a private hospital before she was delivered of a dead baby by vacuum extraction. She developed a rectovaginal fistula. What that means is that she started leaking stool from her rectum. So she was leaking stool constantly. Over the next 9 years, she would undergo several surgeries to correct this damage. During that period, she lost her job. She lost her marriage because her husband and his family decided that she was incurable because she was bewitched by a husband in the spirit world who didn't want her to have a husband in this world. If the system fails a woman like Nkiru who went to the hospital, then we have questions about the trust that people have for the hospital. In both North and South Nigeria, a lot of women and their family are resistant to hospital deliveries because they fear that if they go to the hospital, they're going to be subjected to delivery by cesarean section, and that is a thing of shame. God forbid. I'm not able to have a vaginal delivery, then maybe I'm not woman enough. There's something wrong with me. And even amongst educated Nigerian women who deliver by cesarean section, they may not tell their friends that they deliver by C-section. You know, only their immediate family members will know, because there's a certain stigma attached to it for some reason. Another problem in the southern part of Nigeria that's growing, unfortunately, is delivering in prayer houses and houses of religion. Because there is that fear that if you deliver in those places, you're going to protect, you know, your unborn child and the mother from witchcraft during this vulnerable time in their life. But these places don't have skilled birth attendants, so a lot of these women still end up with obstetric fistulas and dead babies on top of everything. So we have to ask the question that if the hospital system, which we all say is the way to have a baby, fails a woman like Nkiru, what about the poor, gullible, you know, illiterate woman? How are we going to convince her that she should trust the hospital system? Poor maternal health care is another major problem we have in Nigeria when it comes to the formation of obstetric fistulas. So many years ago, while I was doing my urogynecology fellowship, I was looking at a scientific journal and flipping through it. And I came across an article on obstetric fistulas. And while I was reading, I realized that this hospital featured was a hospital I knew. It was in Jos, Nigeria. And I'm like, how could I not know about this hospital and what it did and how, you know, the story that they told? I was born in Jos. I grew up in Jos. I went to medical school in Jos. Hail Josite. You know, we went to medical school in Jos and we had a sound education. But I did not know about the scope of this problem in my community. I think this fact is important because it just shows the shame and stigma that's attached to having a fistula, and the fact that these women are forgotten, even by the medical community. And because they're forgotten, it subjects hundreds of thousands of women to the potential abandonment, poverty by their families. You know, I feel a deep kinship with these women of my birth country because they are my sisters, they are our sisters. You know, but for the random chance of birth, I could be one of them. They could be standing here instead of me. According to the World Health Organization, there are about 2 million women living with obstetric fistula all over the world. You know the unfortunate thing? About 40 to 50% of those women are in Nigeria alone. That means about 800,000 to 1,000 women are living with obstetric fistula in Nigeria. And that's the number that exists now. Every year, there are somewhere between 12,000 and 20,000 new cases of obstetric fistula every year. Guess how many surgeries are done per year for obstetric fistula in Nigeria? Give me a wild guess. 10. You guys are busy. 3,000 to 4,000. That's a rough estimate. But at 3,000 to 4,000 surgeries per year, if you do the math, and there is no more fistula in Nigeria. So today, there's no new fistula. With the backlog of cases we have, at the rate at which we're operating, it will take 30 years to clear the backlog. Okay? And for every woman who has a surgery to repair her obstetric fistula today, 50 women go untreated. And many of those women will die without ever being treated. Many people think of obstetric fistula as a northern problem. It really occurs mostly in the north. But there's a significant incident in the south which is not really spoken about. In fact, the first fistula hospital in sub-Saharan Africa and in Nigeria is the Family Life Center in Uyo. And that was established in 1937. That's the first fistula hospital. We don't talk about fistula in the south as much as we talk about it in the north. Now, Nigeria is very culturally diverse. There's so many different people within its borders. And there's that religious, economic, cultural divide. It's reflected in the fistula story because more women are treated in the north than in the south. More resources are diverted to fistula in the north than in the south. I'm from the north, so I know. Okay, people in the south don't really talk about fistula, so there are many women who are suffering in silence because there's a certain belief that, oh, it's another problem. No, it's a Nigerian problem. It affects all of us. So, why does Nigeria claim monopoly over the, burden of the world's fistula? Half the world's burden of fistula is within our borders. Why? It's a reflection of poor access to maternal health care, dangerous ancient cultural practices like childhood marriage or pregnancy, female genital mutilation, misperceptions and superstitions that surround pregnancy and childbirth. Just various reasons that are not very useful to us today. So, what can we do with that information? Well, we're here tonight because the women of NKS UFORO IBAN have chosen to be a voice and champion for women in southern Nigeria suffering from obstetric fistula. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Please. They support the Family Life Center in Uyo. This center was founded by the medical missionaries of Mary in 1937, like I said. It's one of the very few centers in the south that provides life-changing surgeries to repair obstetric fistulas and also rehabilitation free for those women who cannot afford anything. However, this center struggles with a lack of, adequate medical supplies. They don't have skilled surgeons. They don't have, resources for their patients. They are wholly dependent on the goodwill of their donors. So by being here tonight, every one of you have added their voice to theirs. The fistula problem in Nigeria will only be solved when we as a people, we come together to lift the veil of shame, ignorance, and mystery that surrounds this horrible affliction. When the life of every woman in Nigeria, regardless of her status, is considered just as important as the life of every other citizen. And when maternal health care is efficient, it's universal, and it's easily accessible to everybody. Obstetric fistula is completely preventable. We have no reason still having that in this world today. It has been eradicated in the Western world. So our goal is to eradicate it in the developing world, but especially in Nigeria. Thank you. Thank you.
Please give Dr. Annette George a round of applause for such a wonderful presentation. We're sorry if we caused indigestion, but those are real stories.